Okay, it's time for our panel. And I want to invite on stage Schneider, Ronald Kogens, and also Ronald Verhoeven from AFM. Because, yeah. So, anyone in the audience planning on or working on ICO plans? How many of you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, at least 10, I see. And who is going to launch their ICO within 6 months? Okay, this is about the same. And who will choose the Netherlands as their jurisdiction? Okay, a little bit less. So where are the other hands going then? Switzerland. Okay. Okay. So that's going to be an interesting way, because I would really like to know what makes the final call in choosing that place to go, because if we can get it right here in the Netherlands, if you can create a regulatory framework for responsible ICOs, so to say, the question then becomes, if you look at what venture capital did for Silicon Valley, can ICOs do the same for the Netherlands? And it's just a question, but I think it could be an interesting question to further explore, because I think we can, as an ecosystem, become quite strong at this game. So please join us on stage, Ronald, Lee. And I first would like to start with a small, also an introduction. Ronald, can you tell a bit of what you are working on within the AFM and how ICOs are in your scope?
Yeah, of course. I work within the AFM in the Efficient Capital Markets division. I'm, among other things, responsible for prospectus supervision. That's a form of transparency, EU law-based. And as such, part of it, I qualify whether or not something is a security, like equity or debt, or a structured product. And ICOs are within that realm. And in that respect, I work together with Ronald and his fintech team to assist on questions from market parties, whether or not they qualify within the scope of some EU regulation. That's what I do.
So, and how many plans have crossed your desk in the past months?
Oh, honestly, a couple a day.
A couple of days?
Yeah, yeah. Some, you know, it's very early stage. Some are very concrete. Some were even really literally launching the next day. So that's
good luck.
yeah, with that. But it's I think we're open to new innovation and technology as a regulator, and as such we are very much in favor of engaging into a dialogue with market parties and with new initiatives. And so at a very early stage, people contact us and ask us how, if this is our intention, how we are doing things, and does this fall within or does it fall outside the scope of regulation currently?
And that would be my final question for now. But is there something you could define, because we see some people from the Netherlands moving their plans to Switzerland? Is it possible to define one single rule that where the friction is? What makes the people, because a lot of things in Switzerland seem the same as here in the Netherlands, but somehow there's a difference.
Well, I think it all comes down to what the previous speakers were mentioning as well. It's about the rights attached to the token, for example, whether or not it falls within the existing regulatory scheme and framework. We have a lot of them. We have prospectus supervision, AFMID, we have a MiFID, for example. So there is already a lot, and you have to be aware of that, and we acknowledge the fact that startup companies and financial innovators normally don't have, the knowledge about the legal knowledge, at least, about what needs to be done and whether or not they fall within supervision.
Well, how is that in Switzerland? What would you define as the single most important aspect of the regulatory framework that attract all these ICO plans and teams and to Switzerland? What makes it different from the rest of the world?
I think it's not the regulatory framework, because oftentimes people are not familiar with it. And for the first time they get familiar with it when they talk to a lawyer. I think it's more the fact that Switzerland had in the past very successful ICOs like Tezos that raised more than 200 millions, or Bancor, or other ones. And I think that's probably the main fact, that people are coming to Switzerland, and also that they know that it's kind of a technology-friendly place. But I don't know what the other reasons are.
When you mention one of them, I think something with the SEC rules conflicted with, I think, Tezos, right? Lee, are you familiar with that case?
Tezos has been sued, I think, in the U.S. To try to determine certain liability issues. I'm frankly not familiar with the case and wouldn't comment on it even if I was, but I do think Ronald makes some good points. But Switzerland and Zug in particular have become known because of the original token sale, which was done by Ethereum Foundation based there. And so they have a lot of gravity to pull projects there.
Great. So where's our catch box? Still over there. So we now have a tremendous amount of knowledge and also connections on the stage. So your questions are very welcome. I think the people who are planning an ICO should have plenty of questions. So Kaushik here, or Salim? Yeah.
Sorry, my fault.
Can you also stand up and tell what you're working on and yeah.
Yeah, so we are looking into doing an ICO, and now we're...
What's your name?
My name is Salim Hadri from Milvam.
Exactly.
CEO of Milvam.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm thinking to do it in Switzerland, because you have a track record. If you compare it to a client that's looking for expertise in the market, you go to a person you can trust and did it before. And I think the idea is comfortable knowing that Ethereum is founded there and other big coins. They're still doing great, and in that sense give new participants security in choosing that country because they've done it before and they're still doing it. And I think the Netherlands should be asking the question, do you want ICOs in the Netherlands? And if you do, invest in make it comfortable for those parties to come in contact to. And the first thing I would do as the AFM is having a team of 5 people won't do the work. Expand the team, and then you will get things done.
Okay, so
the question here is that you have some rules in the sandbox. Are there any websites where you make it really clear in a video, like these are the rules if you want to come work with us, or do we need to have a meeting before knowing this kind of information? Because for me it's a black box. I don't know which rules you are working by here in the Netherlands. Is there anything that's really easy to access to get that knowledge?
Okay. Question to me, I think. Yeah. Well, first though, it's the core team. It consists out of 5 people. There are many more people working within the AFM on blockchain technology and ICOs. So don't worry about that. Second thing, in all honesty, the current regulation and the way the AFM is looking at it doesn't differ much from what FINMA's position and their statement. They have published their short statement. Continuing on your question, if you would like to get into contact with us, just send us an email. It's easy as that. And whether or not it could be a conference call or a courtesy meeting, everything is possible. On your request for information, we currently have a statement in preparation, which we will be able, hopefully, to publish somewhere in the next 2 weeks on ICO specifically. Yeah.
Okay, one last question.
Yeah, sure.
On the idea that the financial ministry they think of the rules and make regulations, and you as the AFM supervise on that. How can we trust in somebody making rules, but he doesn't know the technology to make it work? Like, isn't it wrong to understand the technology and try to make it useful with existing regulations? Instead of, I would approach it in the other way, putting someone and at the top, knowing what the technology does, give him the authority to come up with rules that fit technology, because I think the upside is huge. And yes, we should have regulations, because we will then have a lot of smart criminals and a lot of people would be affected by it. But it's pretty broken system, giving the power to someone that doesn't know what he's talking about, and then trying to make it work on those rules. Are we working on doing it in a smarter way?
Yeah, well, it's not simply top-down. So it's not the Ministry of Finance dictating what the AFM needs to supervise on. I think we form our own opinion based on fintech team, and their interactions with market parties and consulting different, initiatives and engaging in events like this. So honestly, I think it's the other way around. I think we are currently feeding the Ministry of Finance with, the upside of financial information, usage of DLT, ICOs, etc. But also warning for the downside, the risks for investors, for example. Yeah, perhaps that's enough for now. Yeah.
The reason why, because the presentation said you are a supervisor role and not the advisory role.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But okay, thank you.
I think also this meeting shows what kind of momentum we are all in connecting dots. There's a lot of knowledge in the market. There's a lot of knowledge at universities currently being developed. And there's also a lot of knowledge from the legal space as well as the regulatory space. And I think only if you get that together, you can make a step forward. And it's meetings like this where that can happen. So that's why your input is also very important. I haven't seen a lot of blogs by, for instance, startups on the 3 reasons why they can't do an ICO here. So I think startups should also contribute to explaining what they want to accomplish and how in what way they tried, and see how you can take that approach as well. I see some questions here as well.
Rutger,
Yeah,
can I just add something to this? Because I think your question is a very important one, because your question assumes that the regulator should have the obligation to teach, and that is absolutely correct. But the community also has to have the obligation to teach the regulator, as Rutger is saying, but also to learn what the regulation is. And so it should be a dynamic process, just like when you're learning a new coding language, you have this dynamic process with somebody who's teaching it to you. There's trial and error. You do some code, it doesn't work out, you rewrite it, it works better, and you keep improving on it. You should take that same thoughtful approach to thinking about how what you're doing will be regulated.
Yeah. More questions. So, here in the front, I see 3 fingers.
Yeah, it's your call.
Yeah. Throw it over here.
I don't want to hit someone.
Someone catch.
Yes, just.
Hello.
It's soft. It's okay.
Yes, hello. I have a question for Mr. Lee Schneider. I work myself as well as a lawyer in the Netherlands. And I was just looking at For example, Kraken, the internet exchange, ICOs. In the Netherlands, we think that, or we believe that in the US, it's a very regulated market, especially the stock market trading, front running. People can go to jail when they trade with knowledge they shouldn't have. Much more regulated than in the Netherlands, I would say, or much more aggressive. How do you say, compliance rules. But on the other side, we see the blockchain community in San Francisco and Kraken and so on. So maybe you can say something about how this is kind of possible, because it feels kind of unregulated to me, but it's still happening. So I see some kind of paradox there.
I think it's an interesting question. So the SEC's mandate is limited to regulation of securities. If something is not a security, it cannot reach the regulation of that product or service. So when tokens are not a security, the SEC, just by its statutory mandate, can't engage in regulation there. But that doesn't mean that no one can regulate them or that nobody does regulate them. I made the comment, don't commit fraud, during my presentation earlier. There are many fraud statutes in the US, both at the federal level and at the state level, that a project could have trouble if they don't comply with those fraud statutes. So that's one answer to your question. Another answer to your question is the level of regulation of publicly traded securities is very tight. There's no doubt about that in the US. Private securities, that is to say, securities that are not publicly traded, there's much less regulation associated with those offerings and with transactions in those securities. So what we're seeing in the ICO space or the token space is something that's more equivalent to the level of regulation of private securities transactions as opposed to publicly traded securities.
Thank you very much.
Kaushik?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kaushik, founder of 2Blockchain. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Great. So we are a Dutch company, and of course, we investigated into ICO. We have a product for the utility sector. We also discussed with some of the lawyers in Switzerland, and we were just trying to look at what is the parity between the laws here and in Switzerland. And what we found out was, one, regarding KYC. We found that if we do a global sale for the tokens, we need to be within the context. So from a KYC perspective, I think there is a difference between what the regulations in Switzerland state and what we do in Netherlands. So this is one thing I would like to clarify. And the second part is when AML kicks in. So I think the threshold at which AML kicks in is quite different in terms of size as compared to Netherlands and in Switzerland. So could you please reflect on these 2 points? Thanks.
So, well, would you? So basically, I mean, the KYC. Kaushik, you say in the Netherlands you have to do KYC on every investor, and in Switzerland that's not the case.
Yeah.
Okay. So you recognize it, and how do you cope with that, basically?
I mean, it's very difficult to get an answer here because I don't agree that in Switzerland you don't have to do KYC. It really depends on the token, but the example that I mentioned before with the payment instrument, then you're becoming a financial intermediary, which is much more than just doing KYC. But I think at the end, if you want to do a serious ICO project, you're interested in having funds that coming from legal sources. And especially if you want to exchange the funds at a later stage into fiat and bring it to a bank. Because I think no bank will ever accept any funds that not went through KYC, and oftentimes they require that it's coming from a financial intermediary. But even then, I have to say, a lot of banks in Switzerland started to refuse blockchain companies, even if they don't do an ICO, because they just fear that the funds are coming from illegal sources. So I actually don't see kind of a difference. I don't know the Dutch law, but for me, also in Switzerland, KYC is very important.
Yeah. So any startups here that have that same experience trying to get a banking account? No. Only one. Okay. Well, Ray, you had a question as well.
So my question is, how are you going to respond to just give context? So I think Rutger actually hit the main point here. So regulation is typically based on centralization, right? All the different corporate or government structures have some centralization of either the ledger or the economies. And as Rutger said, this is distributed ledger and distributed economies. And as mentioned in the back, there's no global boundaries. And right now I get the impression when I'm hear the regulators talk, it's kind of the, and since we're in the Netherlands, it's the little Dutch boy with his finger in the dike. The only thing holding it back is the technology. So when the immediacy problem is solved, when governance is improved, and when scaling is improved on the blockchain, then how are you guys going to deal with that? Because it's going to crash everywhere at that point.
Yeah.
It's well. It's whoa.
It's okay. I mean, these are questions. We're thinking about these kind of things. It's not as if we've been thinking about it for months already, or some may, but this is a totally new discussion. So feel free to rephrase or
and just to give context,
to enter a dialogue.
I have a number of companies that I invest in that are working in this space. And I won't tell you who I am because I don't want to be in anybody's sandbox or anything like that. But no, but so we're looking at this from that scale because it's the next generation technologies. It's Bitcoin 2.0 that we're working on, and so you guys are working to solve these problems, but we're working on the next problems.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid that as a regulator, you're always, at least one step behind. And laws and regulations, I think at least two. So, but first off, perhaps I can get back to you on your question first, because know your customer is I'll get back to you, sorry, but know your customer isn't an issue with a plain vanilla ICO. It's something that when you fall within MiFID or if you're issuing a token which qualifies as a unit within the investment schemes. So I don't think we are not very much different from Switzerland in that respect. Getting back to your question, I think we're trying our best. I think that's the best answer I can give you right now. It's we acknowledge that we are not there yet, and we try to facilitate and knowing or trying to know what you are knowing and what you're doing, and trying to match that from a legal point of view. But we have to acknowledge the fact that the law is where you're coming from. It's the basis. So a statutory seat, in most cases, forms the fundament on which we are engaging on with you, whether it not being the prospectus supervision or AFM ID. And I don't think that will change within the near future, especially its EU regulation. And so my guess, my estimate will be that within the next 20 years at least, you will still run into legislation, albeit much more EU regulated, I think so. Yeah.
I think also to follow on that point, this is an area where we need to come up with some first principles, some common principles on a global basis. There needs to be coordination globally by regulators on this. Otherwise, some jurisdictions will permit certain activities, other jurisdictions will prohibit that activity. We see that right now. China and South Korea have bans on ICOs. That's very different from the situation in the Netherlands or Switzerland or the US or many other countries. unless the global regulators coordinate and come up with some basic principles that will apply to in all countries or in many countries, will be lost.
Okay, so I think also to put the analogy into perspective. I mean, if you had to regulate correspondence between people, then the question could also be, how are you going to regulate email? And for Bitcoin, it's or any global ICO, it wouldn't be much of a difference. So then maybe we can also think in the hackathon within the tracks. How can regulation be applied? I mean, if you're working on a global solution, how can it be applied on a global scale, but with something that holds the Dutch quality? And maybe you can implement certain governance rules or certain regulatory functionality in your solution and take that global. No idea how that would work, but hey, in the end, doing checks on all kinds of stuff could be done by software in a way. So maybe, yeah, we can collaborate with smart people who develop software on that. There's one question, time for one question. There's much more time in the end of the program. Are we going to have a break after this? So okay, after this we'll have a break. Feel free to address more questions here in the front. Woo.
Hello.
So what's your name and what are you working on?
My name is Robert Nas. I'm from the company Crypto Trader. Welcome everyone. I'm an ICO consumer. As the name of the company already says, I'm a crypto trader, but that is not what we do. We attended some ICOs and we found the benefits from it. But if I give some numbers with it, if we look to the amount of investments in the ICO, when it started in my head, like in the late 2016, it was a market from only a few million. Then there was the big hype in the summer, and it went from 100 million to 600 million in only 1 month. So what we did with the company Crypto Trader, we saw a lot of people that want to invest also in the ICOs and want to pick the benefits from the crypto trading. And we started an office, non-profit, where we make a platform for the consumers in Holland to provide them with information. And Ronald, we already talked before this presentation. And I was a bit surprised about what you were saying, like we first want to see more and we want to have more information what is happening in the ICO area. But I think it's really, really important that there come regulations. And I respect what you're saying, that we are always walking a step behind of the new technology. But what I think that is the most important thing is that the consumers need to inform what the risks are. So not like ICOs are now from this year, but next year they will have something else. I think to inform the consumers is the most important thing to do.
What would be your question?
I just want to say
Okay,
thank you.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
right.
if I can respond to it,
Sure.
I think you're totally right. I think transparency is key in this respect. Transparency during the initial coin offering. I think a white paper generally is lacking a lot of the information that is currently required under the Prospectus Directive, which provides a framework for the minimum disclosure of information to enable an investor to make an informed investment decision. So I think you all can improve on that. But I think more importantly, after the ICO, post-transparency about how things are going, how the funds that you've collected are being spent, your financial information, I think management, so the development team, is absolutely crucial in this respect. So how is the team going? And just providing a website with the next milestones, the overview, it simply doesn't cut it. I think a lot of more information needs to be disclosed on a continuous basis.
Okay, so that's a good one to wrap up with. Can you already did that, Ronald? Can you also give some advice to everybody on how we can take the whole situation where we are right now with ICOs in the Netherlands? What could we do as an ecosystem to take it to the next level? Basically, I hear from you, Ronald, that information, more information, continuous information, that basically also applies to public listing almost, is very important to keep the public informed and to basically take them on a journey you're also taking yourself.
Yeah.
What would you say, Lee, would be for the Netherlands, as you look at it from a distance, something that we can do as an ecosystem to take that next level?
Well, I think that is a hugely important point, and it's something that we encourage all of our clients in the space to do. I think not just information in connection with the ICO, but on an ongoing basis is very important. To my mind, this public-private partnership that you're trying to develop here is really an important step to keep things moving forward. Without the dialogue between the regulators and the industry, without good communication between the government and the industry, you're really going to find that both sides will be at odds with each other as opposed to trying to collaborate and cooperate to move things forward. To my mind, that's hugely important.
Thank you, Lee. Ronald, what do you see?
I mean, I totally agree, and I think if you're looking at ICOs and that regulation, I mean, we have to know that regulation is not here to benefit a certain industry or to kill a certain technology. It's here to protect the public. And that's why it's very important also with ICOs. If you issue a coin and you're getting money, you are responsible towards these people because you promise something. And that's why it's more than fair that you have a clear white paper, that you have clear terms and conditions, what someone's get. And I think also follow-up after ICOs, as the other two already said, that it's important you have to inform these people. Because you got the money, you have to do now something. You promised that. And I think that's why it's important to keep this very interesting instrument, ICO, alive, that it becomes more professional.
Great. Thank you all. Thanks for your questions, and big hand of applause.